It was just another ordinary day for Maria. The sun was still low in the sky, casting a soft orange glow over the small town. The streets were calm, and the town seemed quiet, almost like it was still asleep. For most people, it was just another typical morning. But for Maria, every day was a struggle. Maria was a young black girl, about 16 years old, and she had been living on the streets for as long as she could remember. She didn't have a home, but she did have something precious: her dog, Max. Max was a big, loyal brown dog who followed her everywhere. He was her best friend, her protector, and the only family she had. They had become quite familiar with the streets of the town. Maria had learned how to survive by finding food and safe places to sleep. Every day was a challenge, but Maria had learned to make the most of it. She was used to the stares from people, the whispers behind her back, and the occasional cruelty of strangers who treated her like she wasn't even human. But Maria had learned to ignore it. She had to, or it would break her spirit. That morning, as the sun began to rise, Maria walked along the park path with Max by her side. She had found a quiet spot under a tree the day before, where she and Max could sleep without being disturbed. The park was a place where people came to jog, sit, and relax, but for Maria, it was just another place to survive. Today, it felt different, though. The air was cooler, and there was a calmness that Maria didn't usually feel. She sat down on the bench, Max lying beside her, his head resting on her lap. She reached into her backpack and pulled out a small bag of bread she had found behind a bakery the day before. It wasn't much, but it was enough to keep her going. As she took a bite, she glanced around the park, looking at the people walking by, each one with their own life, their own story. Some of them didn't even notice her, and Maria was used to that. But today, something unusual caught her attention. Two men walked into the park, both wearing dark suits and looking very out of place. They didn't seem like the usual joggers or tourists who visited the park. They walked with purpose, scanning the area as if they were looking for something or someone. Maria didn't think much of it at first. She had seen people like them before. People who looked important or powerful, but they didn't usually care about someone like her. Max seemed to notice them, too. He lifted his head. His ears perked up. Maria rubbed his head gently, trying to calm him down. But Max didn't stop watching the men. She decided to pay more attention to them. Maybe they were lost or looking for something. Maria had learned not to trust many people, but sometimes you had to help. As the men walked past her, one of them looked over at Maria and smiled. It wasn't a warm smile, more of a polite one, but it was enough to make Maria feel like she wasn't invisible for once. She quickly looked away, not wanting to make it obvious that she had noticed. But Max growled softly under his breath, still watching the men. Maria felt a strange pull in her gut. There was something about these men that didn't seem right, but she couldn't quite put her finger on it. She stood up, holding the bag of bread in her hands, unsure of what to do next. She thought about moving away from the park, but then she remembered that she had nowhere else to go. This was her home for now, and she couldn't afford to leave it behind. As she started to walk toward the edge of the park, the two men stopped near the bench where she had been sitting. One of the men turned to her and said, "Excuse me, miss. Could you help us with something?" Maria froze, unsure of how to respond. She wasn't used to being spoken to, especially not by strangers. She had learned that people only wanted something from her, usually money, or worse, her dignity. But there was something in the man's voice that didn't seem threatening. She hesitated before replying. "What do you need help with?" "We're looking for someone," the man said, his voice low. "Someone who might have information about something important." Maria raised an eyebrow. She didn't know what kind of information they were talking about, but it wasn't her business. She had learned to keep her head down and stay out of things that didn't concern her. "I'm sorry, I can't help," Maria said, turning away. "I don't know anyone around here." Before she could walk away, the man spoke again. "Are you sure? You might know more than you think." Maria stopped in her tracks. The man's words had caught her attention. She glanced over her shoulder, her curiosity getting the better of her. "What do you mean?" The man gave her a small smile. "It's nothing to worry about. We're just trying to figure out something that could make this town safer." "You seem like you might know the area well." Maria shook her head. "I don't know much. I'm just trying to get by." The man seemed to understand, and for a moment there was silence between them. Then he said, "Well, if you ever change your mind, we'll be here. Just ask for Agent Brooks and Agent Miller." Maria nodded, still unsure of what was going on. As she walked away, she felt a strange sensation in her chest, like she had just crossed paths with something bigger than herself. She didn't know what the agents were up to, but she had a feeling that this ordinary day was about to change her life forever. The following morning, Maria woke up to the familiar sound of birds chirping. But today, the world seemed quieter, almost as if holding its breath. Max was curled up by her side, still fast asleep, his body warm against the chilly morning air. Maria slowly sat up, brushing a strand of hair from her face, and stretched her sore arms. The bench was cold, and the stiff branches of the nearby trees were bare, but there was something calming about the park in the early hours. For a brief moment, she felt at peace. Maria pulled her small backpack closer and rummaged through it for the last of the bread. She didn't have much to eat, but what she had was enough to fill her for the day. She broke off a small piece of bread and handed it to Max, who immediately perked up, tail wagging. She smiled at him, a sense of comfort washing over her. It was just the two of them in this strange, sometimes cruel world. But in this moment, it was enough. She looked around at the empty park. People would begin arriving soon, their busy lives pulling them away from the serenity of the early morning. Maria had learned that the best time to get some peace was before the rest of the world woke up. She enjoyed these quiet moments, but soon she would have to figure out where to go next, where to find her next meal. As she finished the last of the bread, a sound caught her attention. It was faint at first, but it grew louder, the sound of footsteps crunching on the gravel path. Maria turned to see the two men from the day before, walking toward her again. This time, they were looking even more out of place, dressed in their dark suits and walking with a sense of urgency. Maria felt a knot form in her stomach, remembering the strange conversation they'd had the previous day. She tried to ignore them, but Max was already alert, his ears perked up and his eyes fixed on them. The two men stopped in front of her, both looking a little more serious than before. The man who had spoken to her yesterday, Agent Brooks, gave her a quick, polite nod. "Good morning," he said, his voice softer than it had been the day before. Maria didn't respond at first, unsure whether to trust them or not. She wasn't used to people being this polite. Most people ignored her, or worse, treated her like she was invisible. She glanced at Max, who was still watching the men closely, and then back at the agents. "What do you want?" Agent Miller, the other man, stepped forward and hesitated for a moment. "We need your help," he said. "It's important, and it involves the safety of the entire town." Maria's heart skipped a beat. She had been right to feel uneasy. There was something about these men that didn't sit well with her. But their words made her pause. The safety of the town? What did they mean by that? She had no idea what kind of trouble these men were involved in. But she wasn't about to get caught up in anything dangerous. "Why me?" Maria asked, her voice tinged with suspicion. "I'm just a girl with a dog. I don't know anything about the town's safety." Agent Brooks glanced at his partner, then back at Maria. "You may not realize it, but you're the only one who can help us right now," he said, his tone serious, but not threatening. "We're investigating something big, something that involves people in the town who aren't who they say they are. We need someone who knows the streets, who understands the area, and who can help us find the information we need." Maria shook her head. "I don't know what you're talking about. I'm not involved in anything." "We know you're not involved," Agent Miller said quickly. "But the criminals we're after, they blend in with everyone. They hide in plain sight. We believe one of them might have been watching you yesterday. They know what you know, and we need to find out who they are." Maria's brow furrowed. She had no idea what the agents were talking about. She was just a girl trying to get by. But something about their words felt different this time. She wasn't sure if they were telling the truth, but she could sense the urgency in their voices. Maybe they weren't lying. Maybe they did need her help. Max growled softly at Agent Miller, sensing his hesitation. Maria placed a hand on his back to calm him down. "I don't know what you want from me," she said, her voice quieter now. "I'm not a detective. I don't have any answers." "We don't need you to be a detective," Agent Brooks said, his eyes narrowing slightly. "We just need you to point us in the right direction. We believe the person we're after might have tried to make contact with you. If you remember anything from yesterday, anything at all, it could be the key to solving this." Maria thought about it for a moment. She hadn't seen anyone acting strange yesterday. Other than the agents, of course. But then something clicked. She remembered the way one of the men had looked at her, the way they had asked her if she knew the area well. It was a small detail, but it felt important. The hairs on the back of her neck stood up. "I don't know if I can help you," she said, slowly standing up and dusting off her pants. "But I'll think about it. I'll let you know if I remember anything." The agent seemed to accept that answer for now. Agent Brooks gave her a small, grateful nod. "Thank you, Maria. We appreciate any help you can give us." As they turned to walk away, Maria felt a strange mix of emotions. She wasn't sure if she had just made a huge mistake, but something told her that these men were telling the truth. Maybe they really were trying to save the town. But she also couldn't shake the feeling that she had just stepped into something much bigger than she could have imagined. Max whined softly beside her, as if sensing her unease. Maria ran a hand through his fur, trying to calm herself down. The day had started like any other, but it felt different now. She didn't know how or why, but she had a feeling that her life was about to change in ways she couldn't yet understand. Maria woke up the next day with a sense of unease. It wasn't that she had slept poorly or that she was feeling sick, but something about yesterday kept running through her mind. The two agents, Agent Brooks and Agent Miller, had left her with more questions than answers. She couldn't shake the feeling that she was somehow involved in something bigger, something that she didn't fully understand. The way they looked at her, like she held a piece of the puzzle, had stayed with her. Max, as always, was at her side, his large brown eyes searching her face. He seemed to sense her tension, offering a soft whine of reassurance. She reached down and scratched behind his ears, trying to push the worries away. "We'll figure it out," she muttered to him, though she wasn't sure if she was reassuring him or herself. The park was still quiet as Maria packed up her small things, her backpack, a blanket she had borrowed from an old donation pile, and a few items that were barely enough to get by. She noticed a few people walking by, but they didn't pay her any attention, which was exactly what she preferred. She had grown used to the isolation, the feeling of being invisible, but today she couldn't shake the thought that someone was watching her. Just as she was about to leave the park and find a new place to spend the day, she spotted the two agents again. This time, they weren't alone. They stood by a black SUV parked near the edge of the park, talking to a third man. He was older, wearing dark sunglasses and a long black coat, even though it wasn't cold enough for one. Maria's curiosity flared up again, but this time she felt an instinct to stay hidden, to keep her distance. Something wasn't right. Max growled softly, and Maria crouched beside him, placing a hand on his head. The agents had never given her a full explanation of what they were doing, but she now understood that they were involved in something far more dangerous than she had imagined. She could feel the tension in the air, a kind of silent urgency that she couldn't ignore. She decided it was best not to get involved. At least, not yet. But just as Maria turned to walk away, she heard the unmistakable sound of footsteps behind her. She quickly glanced over her shoulder and saw the third man, the one in the dark coat, walking toward her. His eyes were cold, and he didn't look like someone she could trust. Maria's heart skipped a beat, but she tried to remain calm. "Excuse me?" The man's voice was sharp, cutting through the morning air. "Are you Maria?" She froze. Her mind raced, wondering how he knew her name. Had the agents told him? Was this another agent, or something worse? She forced herself to stand her ground, turning slowly to face him. "Yes, I'm Maria," she said cautiously, keeping her voice steady. "Who are you?" The man didn't answer right away. Instead, he studied her, his gaze unnervingly cold. After a long pause, he finally spoke. "I'm with the same group as the agents you met yesterday. You've been helping them, whether you realize it or not." Maria's stomach turned. She had known something was off, but now it felt like the world was closing in on her. "I haven't helped anyone," she replied, her voice barely a whisper. "I don't even know what you're talking about." The man stepped closer, his expression hardening. "You helped them yesterday. By talking to them. By giving them information you didn't even know you had." His words sent a chill down her spine. "But now you've become a part of this. Whether you like it or not." Maria's heart pounded in her chest. She didn't know what to say, didn't know what to do. She looked down at Max, who was now standing protectively by her side, his growl low and threatening. She couldn't shake the feeling that she was in over her head. But she couldn't back out now. "I don't want any part of this," she said firmly, trying to keep her voice steady despite the fear rising in her chest. "I don't want to be involved." The man smiled, but it wasn't a friendly smile. "It's too late for that. You've already seen something. You've already heard something. And now, there's no going back." Maria took a step back, her mind racing. She had to get out of here, but how? She wasn't sure who she could trust, but she knew one thing. She couldn't stay here with this man. Suddenly, a loud noise erupted from behind her. The agents had seen the man approach Maria, and without a word, they sprang into action. Agent Brooks moved swiftly, pulling Maria behind him as Agent Miller shouted to the mysterious man. "Back off!" he yelled, his voice commanding. Maria's heart raced as chaos erupted around her. She couldn't keep up with what was happening. She had no idea who the mysterious man was or why he was after her, but she felt a deep sense of danger closing in. Max barked fiercely, jumping in front of her, as if to protect her from whatever was coming. The man in the dark coat didn't back down. Instead, he pulled out a small device from his pocket, pointing it at Agent Brooks. Maria watched in disbelief as the device emitted a high-pitched sound that sent Agent Brooks stumbling backward. He dropped to his knees, his face contorting with pain. "Get down!" Agent Miller shouted at Maria, pushing her to the ground. But it was too late. The man had already turned his attention to her, and before she could react, he moved quickly, grabbing her arm. Max lunged forward, his teeth snapping dangerously close to the man's hand. The man yelped, pulling back. In that split second of chaos, Maria broke free, running toward the park entrance as fast as she could. Her heart pounded in her chest as she ran, unsure where she was going, but knowing she had to get away. Behind her, she heard the agents shouting, but their voices were swallowed up by the chaos. She couldn't think straight. The danger, the fear, it was all too much. As she turned a corner and ducked into an alleyway, she stopped to catch her breath. Her chest heaved, and her mind was spinning. She had no idea what was happening or who she could trust. But one thing was clear. Her life had just taken a dangerous turn, and there was no turning back now. Maria's breath was still ragged as she leaned against the cold brick wall of the alleyway. She didn't know where she was running to, or what she was even running from. The man in the dark coat, he had been after her, and now, more than ever, she realized that something much larger was happening. The agents, who had seemed like the good guys, were tangled up in something dark. But Maria couldn't make sense of it all, and the more she thought about it, the more confused and scared she became. Max was by her side, panting heavily, his tail low as he sensed the tension in the air. She reached down and stroked his fur, trying to calm her own nerves. "We need to get out of here," she whispered, her voice trembling. The alley was dark, the faint smell of garbage filling the air, but at least it was quiet for now. Her mind raced as she replayed everything that had happened. The agents had seemed kind at first, helpful even. But then, that man, with his strange device and cold eyes, had appeared. The way he had spoken to her, with that confident, almost threatening tone, it was clear he wasn't here to help. No, he was a part of something much more sinister, and Maria had no idea how deep this rabbit hole went. She couldn't shake the feeling that she was being pulled into something she wasn't ready for. She had never asked for this. She had never wanted to be involved in anything so dangerous. All she wanted was a simple life, survival, freedom. But now, it seemed like those things were slipping farther and farther out of her reach. Maria glanced around, her instincts on high alert. She knew she couldn't stay in the alley long. Someone would be looking for her, and she had no idea who she could trust. For a brief moment, she considered going back to the park, maybe finding somewhere to hide until the danger passed. But the more she thought about it, the less that seemed like a good idea. Then, out of nowhere, she heard a sound, a soft rustling behind her. Before she could react, a figure stepped out of the shadows, blocking her path. She froze, her heart pounding in her chest, but then she recognized him. It was one of the agents, Agent Brooks. His face was tense, his eyes scanning the alleyway before locking onto her. "Maria," he said, his voice low and urgent. "We don't have much time. You need to come with me, now!" Maria's mind screamed for her to run. But, for some reason, the urgency in his voice made her hesitate. He wasn't supposed to be here. He was supposed to be with Agent Miller, dealing with the situation in the park. And yet, here he was, standing in front of her, looking like he was in just as much danger as she was. I don't know if I can trust you," Maria said, backing away slowly. She wasn't sure why she was saying it. She wasn't entirely sure she could trust anyone right now. But she wasn't about to get caught up in something she didn't understand. Agent Brooks stepped forward, his expression softening. "I know you're scared, Maria, but you don't understand. There's a lot more going on here than you think. The people after you, they aren't just criminals. They're part of something much bigger. They're dangerous. And if you don't come with me now, they'll find you." Maria's heart skipped a beat. She was already on the edge of panic, but his words only made it worse. She didn't know what to believe anymore. But what she did know was that she couldn't stay alone. Not when danger was closing in. "Please," Agent Brooks continued, his voice pleading now. "I know this is a lot to ask, but I promise you, I'm here to protect you. You need to trust me. We can explain everything once you're safe. But right now, we have to go." Maria hesitated, her eyes darting around the alley. She could still feel the weight of the danger pressing down on her, but something about Agent Brooks's words made her pause. Maybe he was telling the truth. Maybe he was the only person who could help her. She glanced down at Max, who seemed to sense the shift in the air. He let out a quiet whine, and then nudged Maria gently, as if telling her to make up her mind. "Okay," Maria said, her voice shaky but determined. "I'll come with you, but you have to promise me that you'll explain everything." "No more secrets," Agent Brooks nodded quickly. "I promise. Now, we need to move fast." Without another word, he turned and led Maria down the alley, away from the park. They moved quickly, their footsteps echoing in the narrow streets. Maria kept close to Agent Brooks, her mind still racing with questions, but she knew she couldn't stop now. Whatever was going on, she was already in the middle of it. There was no turning back. As they reached the end of the alley, they turned into a side street and stopped in front of a nondescript door. It was an old building, worn and unremarkable, blending into the urban landscape. Maria had passed by it many times, but never paid much attention to it. Now, however, She saw it in a new light, something hidden in plain sight. Agent Brooks knocked twice, then stepped back, waiting. Maria's heart pounded in her chest as she glanced nervously over her shoulder. She had no idea what was waiting for her behind that door, but she had no choice but to go inside. The door creaked open, and a familiar face appeared. Agent Miller. He looked grim, his eyes scanning the street behind them before he nodded and stepped aside to let them in. "She's here," Agent Brooks said, leading Maria into the building. Inside it was dark, with only the faint glow of overhead lights illuminating the hallway. Maria followed the agents down a narrow corridor, each step echoing in the quiet. She could feel the weight of the situation growing heavier with each passing second. What had she gotten herself into? "Where are we going?" Maria asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Agent Miller glanced at her, his expression unreadable. "Somewhere safe," he said, "and somewhere where we can finally explain everything. But you're not alone anymore. We'll protect you." Maria wasn't sure what to think of that, but for the first time in a long while she felt a glimmer of hope. Maybe, just maybe, she hadn't been abandoned after all. The door clicked shut behind them, sealing Maria into the dim, windowless room. The air smelled stale, like a place that hadn't been used in a long time. But there was no time to dwell on the musty atmosphere. Her heart still raced from the moments before, from the chase, from the fear that had gripped her when Agent Brooks had appeared in the alley. He had led her here, somewhere safe, he said. But what did that mean? Safe from whom? Max, ever the loyal companion, was at her side, his ears perked up and his eyes constantly darting between the two agents. He didn't trust them fully, but at least he seemed calm, his steady presence offering Maria some comfort. She ran a hand through his fur, trying to soothe her own nerves. The room they had entered was surprisingly quiet, with only the hum of an old fluorescent light filling the space. Agent Miller stood near a table cluttered with maps, files, and various pieces of tech that Maria didn't recognize. He glanced at her briefly but said nothing, his face hard and focused. Agent Brooks, on the other hand, seemed more at ease, though still tense, as if the situation was far from over. He motioned for Maria to sit. "Maria," he began, his voice low and serious. "I know this is a lot to take in, but you need to understand something. You're not just any ordinary person to us. You've played a critical role in something much larger than you realize." Maria swallowed, trying to absorb the weight of his words. She had no idea how or why she was involved in whatever this was, but the more she thought about it, the more confused she became. The last few days had felt like a blur, meeting the agents, being chased, hearing about things she didn't understand. She had lived a life of survival, and this was something else entirely. "I don't understand," she said softly, her voice barely above a whisper. "I'm just a girl with a dog. I don't know anything. How could I be involved in something like this?" Agent Brooks sighed and sat down across from her, leaning forward. "You've been a part of something for longer than you know. You've been in the middle of it without even realizing it." He glanced at Agent Miller, who nodded and reached for a folder on the table. "Maria, this goes back further than you think," Agent Miller spoke up, his voice colder than before. "We've been investigating a covert criminal organization that has embedded itself in this town for years. They're dangerous, and they have influence over a lot more than we thought. They've been using people, manipulating situations, and covering their tracks. And you've unknowingly crossed paths with them." Maria's mind spun. She was just trying to get by, to survive. She hadn't asked for this, for any of it. But now, it seemed like her life was tangled up in something far bigger than she had imagined. "What do you mean, crossed paths?" Maria asked, her voice shaking. "How? I don't even know who you're talking about." Agent Miller opened the folder in front of him, revealing a series of photos and documents. He slid them over to Maria. "These are the people we've been tracking. They've been in and out of this town for years. They're not just criminals. They're part of a much larger organization. And for some reason, they've been watching you. Maria picked up one of the photos. It was a grainy shot of a man in a suit, looking over his shoulder like he was being followed. The face was familiar, but she couldn't place it. There were several other pictures, all showing the same group of men and women, always in dark suits or hidden in shadows. "These people?" Maria asked, holding the photo up. "They've been watching me?" Agent Brooks nodded. "Yes, and the reason they've been watching you is because of your connection to something they want. You didn't know it, but you've been in the right place at the right time. The man you met yesterday in the dark coat, he's one of them. And they're after something valuable, something that you unknowingly hold the key to." Maria felt like she was suffocating. "I don't understand. I don't have anything. I'm just me." "You're not just anyone," Agent Brooks said, his voice steady but insistent. "The moment you spoke to us yesterday, you became part of this. You might not have realized it, but you've been helping us. Without you, we wouldn't have made the breakthroughs we did. You saved our lives yesterday, Maria. Without you leading us out of danger, we might not be here today." Maria's mind was racing. Saved their lives? How had she done that? She hadn't done anything special. She'd just acted on instinct, led them down a path that seemed safe. It wasn't heroism, it was just survival. But now they were calling her a hero, and that made everything even more confusing. "We didn't tell you the whole story," Agent Miller continued, glancing at Agent Brooks. "The organization we're dealing with is far more dangerous than just criminals. They've been working for years to build a network of spies, operatives, and insiders. They've infiltrated every level of power: politicians, business leaders, and even some law enforcement. They're nearly impossible to track." Maria looked down at the photos, her fingers tracing the edges. "And I'm supposed to help you stop them?" Agent Brooks nodded again. "You already are. Everything you've done up to this point has helped us get closer to unraveling their plans. You've unknowingly provided us with the missing pieces of the puzzle, and now we need you to keep helping us. You're the key to stopping them, Maria." Maria shook her head, overwhelmed. "I don't know what I can do. I'm not a spy. I'm just a girl trying to survive." "Exactly," Agent Brooks said softly. "You're a survivor. And that's why you're the one we need. You see things others don't. You know this town better than anyone. You can spot danger when it's hiding in plain sight. You've been helping without even realizing it. That's what makes you so valuable." For the first time since this entire ordeal began, Maria felt something she hadn't in years. A sense of purpose. It wasn't something she had ever sought out, but maybe, just maybe, it was what she had been missing. She had been surviving for so long, but now she realized she could be doing something more. "I'll help you," Maria said, her voice stronger now. "I'll do whatever it takes." Agent Brooks and Agent Miller exchanged a glance. They had known it would take time for Maria to come around, but they also knew they couldn't have done this without her. They were counting on her now, not just for information, but for the courage to face what was coming. "Good," Agent Brooks said. "Let's finish this." Maria stood at the edge of the warehouse, her mind spinning with everything that had happened over the past few days. It felt like an eternity since she'd first met Agent Brooks and Agent Miller, yet everything still felt like a blur. She had been thrust into a world of shadows, espionage, and danger, a world she never asked to be a part of. And yet, here she was, standing in the heart of it, with a role to play she never imagined. Max, as always, was by her side, his alert eyes scanning the area. He knew there was something important happening, something that Maria still didn't fully understand. His low growl told her he sensed the danger before she did, but she couldn't allow herself to feel fear anymore. She had a job to do. Agent Miller motioned for Maria to follow him as they approached the entrance to the warehouse. The building was old, its metal walls rusted, but it was the perfect place for a covert operation like the one they were about to undertake. Inside, the atmosphere was thick with tension. There were no windows, just the hum of fluorescent lights flickering overhead. In the center of the room stood a large table, covered in documents and photos. Some of the faces on those photos were familiar. Agents she had seen before, and some were not. "I know this is a lot to take in." "Maria," Agent Brooks said, his voice steady, though there was a weariness in his eyes. "But this is where it all comes together. Everything you've helped us with has brought us here. This warehouse, these files, it's the key to understanding the entire operation." Maria looked around, unsure what to make of the scene unfolding before her. The men and women gathered around the table were a mixture of agents, analysts, and a few people she didn't recognize. Everyone was focused, poring over documents and discussing in low voices. It was clear that this was a crucial moment in the investigation. "Why am I here?" Maria asked, her voice uncertain. "I've already told you everything I know." Agent Brooks gave her a knowing look. "That's just it, Maria. You know more than you think. You've been in the right place at the right time, and now it's time to connect the dots. The criminals we're after. They've been operating under our noses for years. They've infiltrated every level of power. But we believe they're planning something big. Something that could destroy everything." Maria frowned. "Destroy everything?" Agent Miller stepped forward, sliding a large map onto the table. It was marked with red circles, pins, and lines. "We think they're targeting something critical. A supply chain. A citywide event. Something that could bring the town to its knees. And the people behind this, they've been using every trick in the book to stay hidden." Maria's gaze lingered on the map. She could feel the weight of the situation, the gravity of what was happening. It wasn't just about her anymore. This was bigger than her. It was bigger than all of them. The safety of the town, of everyone she had ever known, was on the line. And somehow, she was a part of it. "I still don't understand," Maria said, her voice trembling despite herself. "How do I fit into this? Why me?" Agent Brooks looked at her with a sense of respect. "You don't realize it yet, but you've been helping us from the start. Your ability to read situations, to spot danger before it happens, it's what we need right now. You've been living on the streets, and you've learned how to survive in a world full of deception. That's why you're the key. You see things that others don't." Maria's head was spinning. She had never thought of herself as anything special. She was just a girl trying to get by. She never thought her life would matter to anyone, let alone to these people. "So what happens now?" she asked quietly. "What do I do?" Agent Miller looked at her seriously. "We're about to take the next step. We need you to help us find out who's behind all of this. We've tracked down one of the leaders of the group, someone in a position of power, someone who's been pulling the strings from the shadows." Maria took a deep breath. "Who is it?" The agent paused for a moment before responding, his voice low. "It's someone you know." Maria's heart skipped a beat. "Someone I know?" She couldn't think of anyone involved in this who she had met. But then the realization hit her. There was one person who had been acting strangely ever since she had met him. The man in the dark coat. The one who had chased her and tried to stop her from helping the agents. "Is it him?" she asked, her voice barely a whisper. Agent Brooks nodded. "Yes, his name is Victor Hartman. He's a high-ranking member of the criminal organization. He's been operating under a different identity for years, but we've finally tracked him down." Maria's mind raced. She had no idea why someone like him would be involved in this. He had always seemed so calm, so collected. But then again, she had only met him briefly. What did she really know about him? "What do you want me to do?" Maria asked again, her voice firmer now. She couldn't back down. She couldn't just walk away from this. "We need you to help us get close to him," Agent Miller said. "We think he's planning something big tonight. If we can get inside his operation, we can stop it before it's too late. But we need someone who knows the streets, someone who knows how to blend in. That's where you come in." Maria felt a lump form in her throat. The stakes were higher than ever. She wasn't sure if she was ready for what was about to happen, but she knew she didn't have a choice. She was already in this, whether she liked it or not, and if she didn't act now, everything she had worked for would crumble. Max looked up at her, his eyes full of understanding. She ran a hand through his fur. "Okay," she said, taking a deep breath. "I'll help you. Just promise me that we're doing the right thing." "We are," Agent Brooks said, his eyes full of conviction. "We're going to stop him, Maria. And we're going to stop them all." Maria stood in front of the dilapidated building, her heart racing with anticipation. The adrenaline of the last few days had not worn off. If anything, it had intensified, leaving her on edge. Max, as always, stood by her side, his eyes keen and alert, sensing her nervousness. His low growl vibrated through the air, but Maria barely noticed. All her focus was on the door ahead of them, the door that led to everything she had been working toward, everything that had brought her to this moment. She had come a long way from the girl who spent her days hiding in alleyways, struggling to survive. When Agent Brooks and Agent Miller had first pulled her into their world of secrets and danger, Maria had been scared, uncertain of her place in it all. She had never wanted to be part of something this dangerous, but somewhere along the way, things had shifted. Her life had found new purpose, even if she didn't fully understand what it all meant yet. She was no longer just a survivor. She had become a crucial part of something much bigger than herself. Max barked, snapping her out of her thoughts. She smiled softly and gave him a reassuring pat. "It's time," she whispered to him. The agents had told her what to expect once they arrived at the building, but Maria still wasn't prepared for the sense of urgency that filled the air as they walked inside. The room was filled with agents working tirelessly, their faces lined with exhaustion, but there was something more. Something that felt like the calm before a storm. Everyone was waiting for her to take the first step in a mission that could end this nightmare once and for all. Agent Brooks and Agent Miller were already by the table, where the same maps and documents Maria had seen earlier were spread out. The faces on the photos seemed more real now, the danger more immediate. This wasn't just about stopping a criminal group anymore. This was about taking down a network that had been poisoning the town, the very foundation of everything Maria knew. And she had a part to play in it. "Maria, you're here," Agent Brooks said, his voice steady despite the obvious strain. "We're ready to move forward." "Are you?" She nodded, her stomach tightening. There was no turning back. "I'm ready." He smiled, though it was brief. "Good. We need you to get close to Victor Hartman. He's expecting a delivery tonight, one that will finalize the deal with his partners. We're not sure what this delivery is, but we have reason to believe it's something catastrophic. Your job is to find out what it is and where it's going." Maria looked at the map, at the marked locations. She had seen these places before, but they now felt different, as if they held secrets she was about to uncover. The fear was still there, lurking in the back of her mind, but something else was there too. Determination. For the first time in a long while, Maria felt like she was fighting for something worth fighting for. Maria looked at the map, at the marked locations. She had seen these places before, but they now felt different, as if they held secrets she was about to uncover. The fear was still there, lurking in the back of her mind, but something else was there too. Determination. For the first time in a long while, Maria felt like she was fighting for something worth fighting for. "You'll be with Agent Miller," Brooks continued, turning to the other agent who gave her a quick nod. "You'll be working together to infiltrate the delivery. It's a dangerous mission, but we trust you, Maria." Maria glanced over at Agent Miller, who, despite his serious demeanor, offered her a brief but encouraging smile. "We'll make sure nothing goes wrong," he said, his voice firm. Maria swallowed, her thoughts racing. She wasn't sure if she was ready for the next steps, but the thought of what was at stake, the lives that could be saved if they succeeded, pushed her forward. She had no choice but to go through with it. "Where do we start?" she asked, taking a deep breath. First, we need to blend in, Agent Miller said, handing her a small earpiece. We'll be listening in, guiding you from a distance. You'll need to act quickly, but carefully. This is our chance to find out who's behind all of this and stop them before it's too late. Maria nodded and clipped the earpiece into place. The world around her seemed to fade as she focused on the task at hand. This wasn't just about stopping the criminals. It was about finding the truth. And once she found it, there would be no turning back. As she walked toward the exit with Agent Miller by her side, Maria felt the weight of what she was about to do. But there was no fear now. She had come too far to back down. She was no longer the scared girl hiding in the shadows. She had become the hero of her own story. The night air was cool as they stepped outside, and Maria took in a deep breath, letting the crisp air fill her lungs. She glanced at Max, who was sitting in the corner, eyes fixed on her, his body tense, waiting for her to return. She gave him a reassuring glance, as if to tell him that everything would be fine. "Are you ready?" Agent Miller asked, pulling her back to the present moment. Maria straightened up, her resolve hardening. "I am." The streets they walked through were quiet, the usual bustle of the town having quieted down as night took over. But Maria's focus was sharp. This time, the danger didn't feel as foreign. She had lived with it long enough, faced it in the shadows. Now, she was stepping into the light, taking charge of her fate. There was no running away. There was no avoiding it anymore. As they reached their destination, Maria's mind was clear, her purpose stronger than ever. She was no longer the girl just trying to survive. She was a key player in a fight to protect everything she had ever known. She was ready to face whatever came next, to stand against the darkness that had crept into her town. And no matter what happened, Maria knew one thing for sure. This was only the beginning.